Hello and welcome again to the EVA Media World of Business Aviation podcast. This time around, I have the wonderful Tom Chatfield, CEO of Camber Aviation Management, as my guest, and he, like us, will be delighted to know what you think of what we do here. So Tom, welcome.
Hi, welcome. Good to see you again, Paul.
Absolutely, you too. Now, we always start off here with a 3-minute pitch. What is it that you do? What's Camber Aviation Management all about?
Well, we're a completion management company. What we would do is if you, Paul, came up to me today and said, geez, my friend Mike has got an ACJ or an Airbus corporate jet, I want one too. I would ask to sit down with you, have a cup of coffee, perhaps a glass of wine, whatever is appropriate, and get you to articulate, well, first of all, how did you get this idea? And second, what are your needs and why are you looking for an aircraft simply for yourself? So you may tell me that you and your spouse travel, I don't know, twice a year down to South Africa, and the rest of the time you have a small team of people at EVA, and you guys travel around Europe together. And I would say, Paul, that's wonderful, but you sort of need a sports car and a bus, and that's not going to work. So I'd suggest perhaps a charter for the flights down to South Africa and perhaps a fractional for you and your team to fly around Europe. But about a third of the time that we have these conversations, there really is a need, or the person is very passionate about doing a lot of traveling with their family. And we sit down and start to figure out what do they really need. So we try to move away from Mike and his Airbus corporate jet and start figuring out a tailored solution for you. So in contrast to many of the completion managers, we tend to work more upstream as a starting point, where we get to know the client, understand their needs, ask questions about performance, who's flying where, how often do you fly? And from that, we sort of figure out what would be an aircraft type that would be most suited to them, and start to then talk some very rough numbers to make sure that that person understands really what they're getting into, not just in terms of the initial outlay, but what it costs. And then we bring a couple of designers that we would recommend based on that client's sense of style, sense of aesthetics, and introduce the client, the designers. The client normally will pick one relatively quickly, and then the three of us start very simply to figure out initially what that airplane is going to look like. We do spend some time with the designer beforehand, briefing them, saying, listen, these are things you can and cannot do in that fuselage. As you may or may not know, airplane fuselages change shape in flight. They get higher, they get wider, they have what we call deflection points. The 787, a perfect example, actually increases in height almost 8 inches in some areas. So there's some stuff that you have to do there.
Yeah.
And then it's basically what I find actually a very fun project, because once the designer knows sort of what they can't do in certain areas, they can then start to let their imagination run wild and start to develop concepts and floor plans with the client. We work together with that. Once the client says, yes, I like that design, we then turn that into a specification. We take that concept and turn it into something that an engineer would understand. Where we know what system we would use, we would already say it. Otherwise, we describe it very well. And then we go out and RFP it. We basically do a request for proposal to those completion centers that we feel are best suited for it. We receive their responses, we pick the best one, and then we manage that entire process. And we're very active throughout that process. Because we've done so many aircraft and we have a very, very knowledgeable team, we can take a lot of the design that the designer has and turn it into design intent. So a designer may have a beautiful table that's been designed. We take a look at it and say, fantastic. However, if we move it left or right or make a little panel, then you can actually get to a part that's underneath it that may or may not break. So we look at it from a reliability point of view. We look at it from an ergonomic point of view. We just want that airplane that once the owner gets it, that they're absolutely satisfied with it. So we work very closely with the completion center. We help get the aircraft ready for entry into service. And we go all the way down to figuring out what China they need, bringing the right people on board. We may assist with arranging pilot training, perhaps an aircraft management company, setting up an AOC for that operator. We can do all of that. So we really go from the beginning to the end. And then we tend to have a long relationship with these people. They tend to call us once in a while when there's an issue or when it's starting to perhaps get a new sparkle in their eye for a new
Yeah.
aircraft or a refurbishment, then we're happy to sit down together and work together again. So
Yeah.
that's really what we do. We're a team of six, and a fantastic, fun group of people to work with.
Yeah. I have to say, it's thanks to you that in the past, I would walk into an aircraft cabin and go, this is amazing looking around. Now I walk in and think, it looks good, but let me look at the detail. Let me just see where those panels fit. Let me just have a look under here. So thanks to you, you've changed my perspective on all that. Now, you've talked there about what it is that you do now. And I know that you come from vast experience to this point. So I'd like to kind of wind back to the very beginning of your business aviation interest, your aviation interest, in fact. What started it off? What first got you into planes?
Well, actually, to be honest, my first memory in life was sitting in a high chair in Lahr, Germany. I must have been two. And my father was an RCAF starfighter pilot. And him
Oh,
coming into the room, and he's a small man like I am. He had his flying boots were bigger than his feet. So he clumped across the kitchen and he ruffled my hair. And I still really remember, that smell of sort of leather and sweat and kerosene, and him telling me stories about airplanes. And yeah, he got me into it. I was, enthralled literally as a very small child. When I was 14, I was earning money in the summertime in Ottawa, Canada, and I was pushing this bloody heavy lawnmower up and down this person's very large estate and sweating. And I remember the lady who worked there did not want me to wear shorts or a t-shirt, so I had to wear long sleeves and long pants, and it was hot. And I was pushing this silly thing. And my dad stops at the side of the road, and he looks at me and he rolls down the window and goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to earn some money. I wanted to buy a new bicycle." And he says, "It looks like you're working really hard." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Wouldn't you prefer to work in aviation?" And I said, "Christ, yeah." So I turned off the lawnmower and he said, "There's a job at the airport. The flying club is looking for a new dispatcher." And I said, "Great." So I turned off the lawnmower. I left it literally there. I got into the car and he goes, "No, no, no. You have to have a shower. You have to look decent before you present yourself to these people." And I got a job as a dispatcher at the airport. And I started as dispatch. And in the summer times, I then moved to becoming an apprentice all through high school. I learned how to fly. My dad taught me to fly. And I remember at the time I didn't have money for a driver's license, but I did have money for a pilot's license. And it was sort of interesting because, I was quite shy in high school. And I remember there's one girl that I really, really liked. And, she would be invited out to a drive-in movie or that with a car. And then I shyly asked if she would like to go and go flying with me to go have a picnic up on a beach somewhere. And I won.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so we did take our bicycles to the airport, but we managed to fly out, which was cool. So yeah, that's how I got into aviation. I would say when my father had a lot to do with it.
Wow, there are not that many people who can say my father was a CF-104 pilot. That's pretty
And
cool.
yeah, I lived through
Well,
it.
I didn't want to say that, but yeah, okay. It was a tricky machine, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Amazing. Right there in the middle of the Cold War in Germany as well. What
yeah,
a
yeah.
fantastic time. Right, okay. There's a story to be told there, I'm sure, but we must move on. So, uh, winding forwards a little bit, I think at least some of your aviation education was in the UK at Cranfield.
That's right. That's right. I had been working with GCAS as an advisor, and one of the gentlemen I was working with told me he was going to Cranfield soon, and I had a college degree as an avionics technician,
Mm.
and had always sort of thought it would be great to finish university or do a university degree. So I applied to Cranfield in their master's program for airline transport.
Mm.
I got accepted. I thought it was like super cool because of the history of Cranfield, the old fighter station and everything else. And that really came um, to a head when I got there the first time. And since it was a part-time course, it was all mature students, and we met in the old officers' mess. There are all these black and white pictures of guys on guys on Spitfires, and having a drink at the mess. And I thought, wow, this is a very cool place. So I thought Cranfield was fantastic, a little bit quirky, very English, but some amazing memories there, and some fantastic profs. I was really, really blessed.
Yeah, fantastic. I was there recently because that's now becoming a center for hydrogen propulsion, all that kind of thing. So I was there
Yes, yes.
recently, right at the beginning of a term, and it was really interesting. Someone told me that the locals will drive really slowly on campus at the beginning of term because it attracts so many students from overseas. They all look the wrong way when they cross the road.
That's right.
just, just brilliant. Okay, so Cranfield, great experience, obviously moved you along. But beyond that, I think you've lived and worked in multiple countries anyway. You're a proper international person.
Yeah, I left. I studied avionics. Got a job in at de Havilland, which was incredible. I mean, I hadn't even dreamed of that. Worked in production there for a while. Got into test flight, and then a gentleman approached me and said, "Listen, we're hiring international field service representatives, and we've never had an avionics guy on it. And these airplanes, the Dash 8s, are getting more electronic. Um, would you like to do that?" And I thought, great. Like, someone's paying me to go travel? Absolutely. So at 24, I left Canada, and I ended up traveling for 24 years, living in different countries. So I worked for de Havilland initially as a field service rep in Austria, Germany, Taiwan, USA, England. And then I got hired by Contact Air, which was part of the Lufthansa Airlines group.
Mhm.
Lived in Germany for quite a while, working with them. And then was headhunted by Daimler Chrysler to basically help set up their corporate aviation group. So I was
Right.
part of the maintenance team there. So as I understood it, the CEO at the time sort of went to NBAA, walked through the field and went, I'm going to have one of those and three of those. And then came back with a basket full of airplanes and said, geez, we need some people to operate this. And there was a little bit of catch up that was done, as I understood, from the HR group to suddenly set up something and make this all happen. But it was when Daimler had acquired Chrysler, and they needed to,
Mm.
start traveling back and forth. So we had the first Airbus at the time, was called the 319 corporate jet.
Yeah.
We had 44 seats on it, and we were flying it 6 times a
Mhm.
week back and forth between Stuttgart and Detroit. Yeah, and we did all of that. We had 14 or 15 different business jets, and kept that whole thing running. And after that, I left, started a company with a gentleman called Santos Dumont, which was or is still is a bespoke aviation consultancy that specializes in taking aircraft off of lease and putting them back onto lease. At the time, our business idea was really helping EasyJet, which suddenly came to the end of a whole bunch of leases and went, how do
Yeah.
we return these things, right? So
Mm.
we put it together a program with that, spent I think 2 years at the Diamond Hangar in Stansted trying to put airplanes back. And then I got headhunted by Qatar Airways to help set up the Qatar Executive Division.
Right.
Um, had a great time out there. And then I decided after that to come back to Canada. It'd been a long time traveling.
Yeah.
And for the last 10 years, we've lived on the west coast of Canada and have Camber Aviation. So it's been
Amazing.
a lot of traveling.
A lot of traveling. Okay, so that's a really mixed background. There's some business and VIP aviation there. Some what I would call proper corporate aviation, moving a bunch of executives around en masse kind of thing, and some airlines. So what was it that made you settle on Camber Aviation being not just a business aviation company, but very specifically a large cabin VVIP company?
Well, our start really was coming out of Qatar. There was an opportunity to work on the first 787 VVIP aircraft, and
Right.
managed to work with Greenpoint Technologies on that airplane. They were the first ones that did that. It was for a private individual. You may have seen it in 2016. It was presented at eBase.
Mm.
And that really was the kickoff on that, where we said, okay, that was an incredibly difficult airplane to do. A lot of learning on all parties, not just Greenpoint, but Boeing, ourselves,
Mm.
and everyone together was successful. And so coming out of that, we said, okay, listen, Airbus and Boeing seems to be the best way to go for us. We understand those products.
Mm.
We still do some Globals and some Gulfstreams, but we really try to focus on Airbus and Boeings.
Right. Okay. I'll put you on the spot a little bit. That was 2014, wasn't it? 10 years ago when you founded the company. Um,
Yes.
if you think about that point and how things are now, has it sort of developed in the way you expected? Is it beyond your wildest dreams? Do you look back and go, I can't believe we've done so well? What are your thoughts now?
I think, initially it was let's get this 787 done because it was a heck of a lot of work.
Yeah.
And every time you turned a corner, it was like, geez, don't know how we're going to solve this one, right? So there was
Yeah.
a lot of scratching, and in the evenings, a lot of pizza and beer to try to kick ideas around with engineers trying to figure it out. But once we got out of that, it was at first just a sort of phew, we did that. Um, and then basically building the brand so that we could go out and win contracts. And now we're in a position where potential clients come to us. So
Right.
we're quite lucky. So to answer your question, yeah, I think it's beyond our wildest dreams. We have an incredibly great team of people. I love working with every one of them, and we have some fantastic projects that are just, mentally, intellectually challenging, but fun to do.
Yeah. I wish you could tell us about them all, but I know that you can't.
Yeah.
So let's move on to something different then. My feeling is that, okay, aviation is huge for you, but outside of the aviation that's work, I would say that family flying and probably sports cars are the things you enjoy most. So maybe start there with, tell us a little bit about the flying. I think you returned to flying relatively recently, didn't you?
I did. I did. I learned to fly. As I said, my dad taught me to
Mm,
fly. Unfortunately, my dad passed quite young, so I stopped sort of at that age flying. I guess it was a bit of a remorse there.
sure.
And then 3 years ago, my wife at Christmas gave me a gift certificate to go take my ground school again.
Right.
So I think that was a good kick in the pants. I went and did my ground school, started flying again. It was sort of interesting because the lady instructor who was teaching me, she said, "Listen, you're going to need at least 30 hours of flying time to get this back." And after 8 hours, she said, "Okay, you're ready to go fly on your own again." She couldn't really figure that out. I guess I'd been dreaming too much about flying, and now I fly primarily around this area. At some point, we'll get a little airplane to be able to travel further, but it's stunning flying here.
Mm.
It's in the mountains. In the springtime, you get these massive waterfalls coming off the peaks. It feels like you're going into these wild jungle areas, and it's beautiful. It's fantastic to fly around here.
Yeah, I'd love to know if your wife sent you flying because you were very bad at mowing the lawn. I wonder if there's a
We
connection.
got one of those little robotic things.
Have you really? So she was bored with you around the house because the robot was
Exactly.
mowing out. Okay. Um, Tell me about the cars because I think your cars are very British as well, aren't they?
Yes, they are. So they're sort of quirky. So when I was at Contact Air, there was a gentleman who ran quality, Walter Grulish, and he was absolutely passionate about English cars. And I was a little bit lonely starting there on my own. So he said, you know what you need is an old car to restore. So I said, grand. Had I known at that point what I know now, I would not have necessarily taken that car. But it was literally a barn find. It was a 1963 Austin Healey Sprite.
Right.
It had been painted 4 or 5 times. It was bright, sort of Volkswagen orange when I got it.
Ooh.
And when we pushed it into my garage, it had been literally in a barn and it was full of chicken shit. And when we pushed it into my garage, the entire bottom fell out. I mean, I didn't think it was that corrosive, but clearly it was.
Yeah.
So I had no experience welding cars at all. So once we cleaned this whole thing up, I found a local guy who moonlighted in the evenings, doing this kind of stuff. And he taught me how to weld, and we built this massive frame around it because it was going to twist on itself because there was not much metal left. And we built the whole thing. It took me about 3 years. It's a gorgeous little British racing green with brown leather interior. It's a wonderful car to drive, lots of fun. Um, but if I had taken 3 years in my life, I would have most likely invested in a car that was worth more at the end. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
But it's like driving a roller skate. It's a tiny little car, but it's lots of fun to drive around.
But you take it touring, don't you? You go away for days at a time in it.
I go for days at a time. We did get a new car recently. I've been looking for years for an Austin Healey 100. I have this dream, my bucket list idea to go and race in the Mille Miglia. So
Oh.
this car qualifies for it. Um, so we're going to take the next 2 years, restore it exactly to where it has to be to fulfill those requirements. And
Right.
then the Mille Miglia, if you don't know, it's a race from Brescia, northern Italy,
Mm.
down to Rome and back in 3 days. It's more of a rally now. But I've always wanted to do that. I used to go watch the Mille Miglia when I lived in New York, and that's something I'd like to do. So there's a purpose. I have a hoist now in the garage, and I'm ready to start working on
That just sounds fantastic. Okay, well, another story to be returned to at some point then. All right.
it.
So I think hopefully people who are watching this are thinking, hey, here's an inspiring guy. This chap likes things. He likes to do things. He likes to get stuck in there and see them through. And I think perhaps that's what's behind this other aspect to you, which is sharing with young people. You really like to inspire them into aviation. And, a few people I'll talk to this, oh, yeah, I go to a local school or whatever. But you've gone beyond that. You invest time and money in encouraging young people into aviation, I think. I just wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what you do and what the motivation is for it.
Well, when we moved back to Canada, we live in Squamish, which is between Vancouver and Whistler. It's a
Mhm.
relatively small town. And when we first got here, we have one son. His name is Colin. He started here at sort of grade 6. It didn't work that well for him, and there was a new school that was opening called Coast Mountain Academy, and
Mhm.
small school. And the idea was a lot of outdoor leadership, a lot of time outside for the kids, but also very small classrooms.
Yeah.
And while he was there in grade 10, he came to me and he said, "Listen, Dad, would you teach a course on aeronautics in school?"
Mm.
I said, sure. So I came and I taught, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 lessons on aeronautics and a little bit about aircraft design and what's the difference between a business jet and a corporate and a commercial airplane.
Yeah.
And during that time, we were sort of figuring out the curriculum as we were doing
Mm.
it,
Yeah.
and the teachers were great for it. So we built a wind tunnel. We gave
Oh,
the kids chunks of balsa and we asked them to build wings. And they built some great wings. And some of them built them, with slats on them and flaps and everything else. And we figured out how to make smoke and we built this little generator with a glass window on it and flew wings and found out what that would do with I learned a lot about electric fans and how fast they can go and how much it hurts when your fingers in there. But got that to go. The kids loved it. And then I said, towards the end of the course, I said, listen, we're going to have a paper airplane contest. And the local university gave us their school gymnasium.
okay.
And so I said, so we're doing 3 things. And so there was a group of maybe 15 kids. I said, we're going to go for distance. So you can build one for that. And we're going to go for endurance. How long does it stay up there? And the third one is going to be how cool it is. And so the kid said, well, Tom, what's cool? And I said, I'm too old to tell you what's cool. You have to tell me what's cool. So we did this contest. The kids loved it. Some fantastic airplanes that the kids built. Really cool stuff. And at the end of it, I said, okay, guys, so we have a bit of a surprise here for you. I said, the top 1/3 of you, you're going to get your first flying lesson. And
Oh,
the other 2/3, you're going to learn to do geocaching in 3D. And they were all sort of like, what are you talking about? And so what happened is we went down to the flying club. We hired some instructors. Um, 1/3 of the kids who had the best airplanes, they sat in the left seat. They did their first takeoff. They flew the airplane. And the 2 kids in the back seat, these were little Cessna 172s, had had a task to basically geocache. So they had to tell the young pilot in the front where they wanted to fly to see various things around the area. So it was about a 40-minute flight or so.
yeah.
And the kids came back, and what amazed me is I thought this was going to be all, mechanics and learning how to fly and
Mm.
that kind of stuff. They all came back really excited about that, but most of them came back and said, we didn't know how beautiful it was where we
Ah,
lived until we got up above the mountain line here and got to see farther, right?
mhm.
And they were totally thrilled with this. And the kids got together and they all wrote a whole bunch of notes to me about it and how much they liked it. And so we started doing that now every year. And it's grown. This year we had 34 children in 2 different classes. And it's become a big hit. Our
Yeah.
wind tunnel's better. It's got a safety thing around it now.
Yeah.
But it's been a lot of fun. So we just finished the last course in June this year, and we'll be doing it again next year. So it's good fun. And then we've also got a scholarship here where we it just started this year. We give a young student who wants to become an aircraft maintenance engineer $3,000 a year for the 2 years that they need to go to the school, and that covers all of their tuition and their books and everything.
Fabulous. Okay, that's just such a wonderful story. I love that. I love that. I love especially that the kids were amazed by where they lived. That's
Yeah,
that's brilliant. I spoke to someone recently who knew where she lived very, very well, and she'd gone for a flight, and I just said it's just completely different. And you can see how everything relates to everything else. But if you drive or you walk, it's all so far apart. But when you're in the air, you can just see it all at once. Just a very different
yeah,
perspective. Just amazing.
yeah.
Okay, all right. So we are running short on time. So this is the big question. This is the tricky one. Um, what's your favorite airplane and why is it your favorite? And I will allow you to have a couple if you can't decide.
Yeah, okay. I gave that some thought because you said this was going to be a question coming.
Yeah.
So I've got two.
Okay.
So I would say the first is the Starfighter.
Yeah.
My affinity to my father, but um, I always thought that that was the most amazing airplane. I mean, you basically built a lawn dart that went very fast, right?
That's
And then you
right.
strapped someone to it. So,
Yeah.
and I think aesthetically, when you look at it, it's just such a stunning airplane. And the second one I would say is a 787, to be quite honest. Not only
Mm.
did we cut our teeth on that airplane, but when you take a look at the technology that Boeing put into that and um, the engineering that went into it and the struggles that everyone had to really make that airplane work from the beginning. It had lots of problems at the start. It was too heavy, it had certain electronic problems, it had all kinds of things. But the point is that once they got it up and running, it's an absolutely amazing airplane, whether you're flying it commercially or you turn it into an absolutely stunning apartment on wings. So I would say 787 and Starfighter, absolutely. Those are my absolute favorite aircraft.
Fantastic. I think we should just say, because some people may hear Starfighter and not be entirely sure what we're talking about here. It was called the man with the missile, or the missile with the man in it, wasn't it? Because it
Yeah,
was essentially a needle with tiny little wings, Mark II capable, one engine, pilot sitting right there at the front. First flew in 1955, 56, something like that,
yeah,
and
yep,
carried on in Italian service right through the late 90s, early 2000s,
yeah.
and was replaced by the F-16, which this year is 50 years old. So that puts some perspective
Yeah.
on
And
Starfighter.
the F-16 is slower. The
Yes, that's
Starfighter
right. Yeah,
went Mach 2 plus, a crazy thing when you
yeah,
think about it. Yeah.
yeah. Amazing. Okay, that's wonderful. All right. Well, we have to talk another time about sports cars and rallies in Italy. We have to talk some more about starfighters and possibly lawnmowers as well. But for now, we should probably draw this conversation to a close. We'll get you booked in for next time. So thank you, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you to everybody who's tuned into this podcast. And as ever, let us know what you think and let us know if you want us to speak to any particular guests in the future. Again, Tom, thank you so much.